product and market evolution in South Africa.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me to talk at this wonderful show. I have the most absolute FOMO that I'm not there at the moment, but sadly I'm sitting with ill family and there was just no ways I could travel. But this one I will make up to you, Iman. I will see you at the next SiGMA. From my understanding and from what I've seen on social media so far, this seems to be the same high SiGMA standard as you show everywhere else in the world. So really I wanted to do a quick snapshot of the South African market. Obviously in the few minutes we've got, we can't go into much depth on anything, but I just want to touch on a couple of key areas and then open up to questions and we can take it from there. Now, obviously, as Aideen was saying, I think probably the majority of the conference, and quite rightly, has been around the core areas, the Kenyans, Nigerians, Tanzanians, Ugandans. But then we've got South Africa in the mix as well in the continent. And for those of you that are new to the continent, I think one of the things you probably come away with by now is we're not a monolith at all. Each market is a totally separate thing. And I think, in fairness, South Africa is probably different to all the markets up in Central and East Africa. If I had to take a personal comment on it, I would consider us more aligned to a European jurisdiction in terms of the sports betting aspects and player patterns than we would be to an African behavior. I throw that in there. So my name is Martin Stack. I'm a consultant. I have operated globally in Africa and in the South African market. Just in terms of pedigree, I've managed a number of the bookmaking operations in South Africa, and I have brought international tier 1 software to South Africa and helped them navigate the regulatory hurdles. So just a quick view on South Africa. It is a regulated market. The core verticals being casino, land-based casino, sports betting, both online and retail, horse racing, limited payout machines or pokies, freak machines as you choose to call them, and electronic bingo terminals. And obviously the lottery is covered by the National Lottery and the Lotteries Act. In terms of the regulatory framework of it, we are governed by a national gaming board and gaming act, and under that, each province in South Africa has its own provincial licensing authority. So your bookmakers' rules and some of your taxation rules would be different by province to province. Of the national provincial authorities in South Africa, probably the 4 biggest ones arguably are the Western Cape Gaming Board. It would be Mpumalanga, it would be Gauteng, and it would be KwaZulu-Natal. If you were an operator or a software provider looking to come into the market, you would shop around and compare the differences between the various authorities. Also, the access to them becomes slightly different. Some of them only will issue license on RFP. Some of them you can apply straight. And there's small rule differences between them, but overall, they are very competent and helpful bodies in the domain to deal with. So, from an online perspective, the only thing that is legal in South Africa is sports betting. And while we do have various things that look like slots machines and live dealer games, I think it would be fair to say these are fixed odds contingencies, regardless of how they presented. From pure sports point of view, though, I think if I was looking to enter as an operator into the market or as a platform provider, I think for the South African market, local sports are important, are very, very important if you're looking for a competitive offering. Soccer, obviously, same as everywhere else in the world. But if you don't have a quality rugby offering and a cricket offering down to the local levels, it's probably something you'd want to work on if you were in here. In terms of betting patterns, I think we're probably different from places like Nigeria and others. I think the way our punters bet is probably more akin to European. If there's multiples, it's small multiples. We're not looking for the 23-leg life-changing ACCAs in general in this market, but that's where we're at. The interesting bit that's happening in the South African market at the moment is the introduction of these other contingencies that I mentioned, the live dealers and the on-demand games, as the Western Cape would call their slots type products. So live dealer was introduced in 2020 in South Africa, and slots, on-demand games by the Mpumalanga jurisdiction first in August 2020, and that was subsequently followed up by the Western Cape Gaming and Racing Board on-demand or slots products, or allowing those products in May 2022. I think what's been a really, really interesting thing in terms of revenue growth in the market is that following the introduction of a live dealer, and with the slots coming in, you see the revenues generated by the bookmaking sector climbing incredibly rapidly to a stage where I think the bookmaking sector, which the online sector, pretty much is starting to match or get very close to matching the retail casino revenue as far as taxes go. So this is a good sign that there is a good appetite for online gaming products in South Africa at the moment. Okay, it's a competitive market, make no mistake. I've lost count how many bookmakers are in the market, probably at least 40 or 50 to my knowledge. Of those, there are obviously some very, very, very strong incumbents, the likes of the Hollywoods, the Best Ways, the World Sports Betting, come to line solid businesses. And, if you're looking at competing against them, those are probably the areas I would be looking at. Having said that, I think it is a big market. There is room for new entrants all the time, and a lot of them are coming to the country. The Betfreds of the world are coming in, etc., etc. From a marketing point of view, you can do pretty much anything in here as a regulated market. You can do TV advertising within the Google terms and conditions. You can advertise the sports products to Hearts Content. A little bit sticky about the other contingencies at the moment. I think you'd be battling to advertise slots in the market, but from a sports point of view, everything is good. In terms of marketing, from an affiliate point of view, I think South Africa is kind of an underserved market. There's probably a handful, 20, 30, 40 affiliates that might focus on the market, but for a lot of the bigger international guys, they do get overflow traffic. I think it's something that is becoming more relevant as the years are going on. We're starting to catch up to the rest. Obviously, as it's becoming more, I use the word inverted commas, casino games focused, I think that's going to be driven a lot harder than it's been in the past. So from the licensing regime, it is a very, very regulated market. I think probably in terms of various things like player protection and responsible gaming, probably not as hectic in terms of demands as the UK is at the moment, for example, but there certainly is a focus to that. From a tax point of view, I think it's an incredibly reasonable regime. boards are pretty much working at 6% of GGR on sports betting, and I think that is a fairly reasonable cost of doing business as opposed to lots of other jurisdictions. From payment processing points are probably more different to up the rest of Africa. We're looking more at mobile monies and everything else. I think from a South African perspective, we're still very, very much a credit card based environment. Credit cards, sort of APMs at the moment. Obviously, some of the mobile money type vendors are making inroads, and amongst the lower LSM type clients, vouchers are a pretty big deal. What's not a big deal for us at the moment in the space at all is crypto-based operations or crypto to fiat type operations. I just don't think there's volume from that or there's a demand necessarily for that to any large degree. From a fraud and risk perspective, it's not the worst market in the world. I think any competent operator can handle the fraud and risk requirements. They're no different to really anybody else. From a banking perspective, banks are always keen to deal with online operators. In fact, I'm seeing probably more interest in banks and in the commercial banks these days to deal with us, maybe unlike other jurisdictions. And there are vast numbers of quality payment solutions that service the market. Names that come to mind are people like CallPay, people like Ozo. So yeah, there's enough of that. So, from a manufacturer point of view, if you were looking to introduce a product into the market, you've pretty much got to get your product through licensing standards. And I think here's where South Africa is probably, it's a little bit more complex, I think, than getting it through the UKGC, for example. So the first thing you would have to do as a manufacturer of product is you have to have a national manufacturer's license, which you'd get from one of the boards, or you would actually partner with someone. There are various ways of doing it, but fundamentally you've got to have a manufacturer's license. You've got to produce your software according to the relevant standards, the SAN standards, which are fairly prescriptive of a number of things the software has to have, and the reporting that is required for the software. At the end of the day, the tax reports are the tax reports, and those things count. At that stage, once you built your software, you'd go to your testing house of choice. They would test it, and you would go for a letter of compliance, which is issued by a body called the NCRS, which takes a fairly long time to do. That's a 30-day process they've got to do. That, and this is one of the problems in the South African environment. Every time you do an update that touches critical files in your system, you've got to go through this process again. That puts a little bit of havoc if you're working on 2-week sprint cycles and release cycles. It's something you would have to factor in what you're doing. And then obviously you get approval from a gaming board. Just in terms of an operator perspective, if you were operating online, a license from any of the boards would be sufficient to cover you in the country. If you were doing a retail bookmaking operation, you would have to have those locations specifically licensed by the board of the country you're in. I mentioned the testing houses earlier. They're a wealth of information of what's going on in the market and what's required. And I know both Devin and Zena from GLI and BMM respectively are wandering around there. So, if you wanted more in-depth discussions on those things, those are probably the people I would talk to as a starting point. So the most interesting thing in South Africa at the moment that's got operators moving is the introductions of the on-demand games or slots. It's really interesting because it's not the same as just taking your the same slot you'd put in Grey or the UK and bringing it in. There has to be some modifications. The regulators have some fairly specific requirements of what they want to see the reporting of a slot game work or look like in the reports. Fundamentally, a spin of the wheel has to look and act in the reporting structure like it was a sport bet. That's a very, very loose and generic statement, but it gives you an idea. I think at the moment for the market, this is where the gold rush is. I think there are a number of studios that are looking at bringing the software into South Africa, and from an operator perspective, I'd say the more the merrier. Bring them in. Right now, I think that is the biggest opportunity in South Africa. Now, when you bring it in, you can do it either by yourself, or you can, maybe consider the factor of using an integrator, of which there are a couple that have brought various studios in. I look at the likes of Kiran Interactive. I look at the likes of Bitful, who I know both are in the room, Intelligent Gaming. There are a number of guys that can assist you to bring software in. And that, for me, in a nutshell, is a touch on everything in it. And I'd really, really love to know any questions.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? We've one thing I think Martin's very clear is South Africa is dramatically different to the other markets, which is why I appreciate you coming in and giving that viewpoint. It is more aligned, like you said, to the UK than the East, Central and West markets here. Yeah. So I appreciate that insight, and it was really good to have that. Does anybody have any questions here? No, we don't have questions, and we're pushing on to the next session. So, Martin, I would say thank you very much. That was super, and we loved the perspective from South Africa. Thank you, and good luck. Bye.